happened to preparations A through G? I think about these things. This morning, my wife says to me, put mousse in your hair. Makes you look 20 years younger. 67? When the late great comedian Henny Youngman died, the New York Times, instead of its traditional obituary, published a selection of Mr. Youngman's jokes. My favorite of which is the following. A guy needs a lawyer. He looks in the yellow pages. He finds Schwartz, 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 and Schwartz. He calls up, says, let me speak to Mr. Schwartz, please. He's out playing golf. He'll be back at 3. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He's in Chicago on business, expected to return on Thursday. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He passed away some years ago. No longer with the firm. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He says, speaking. This is not the show, this is the warm-up. Jokes. The joke is a widely reviled art form, considered to be at the bottom of the literary barrel. This is because everybody tells them, and badly. But a joke told in the correct manner, concisely, and in the present tense, can mean nothing short of elegant. An example. An old guy goes for a checkup. The doctor says, Mr. Mendelsohn, we'll need a sample of your urine, your feces, and your sperm. He says, take my shorts. Elegant. The lady says, after I'm gone, Morris, I want you should marry again. He says, don't talk like that. Find another woman, give her the beautiful jewels you gave me. He says, don't talk ridiculous. Give her the gowns. He says, don't talk impossible. She says, what do you mean impossible? He says, you're a 14, she's a 9. Guy's making love with his wife. The bedroom door opens, their 10-year-old son walks in. His jaw drops. The father says, come on, it's nothing. Go on, get out of here. The next day, Dad goes upstairs to Grandma's room, opens the door. The kid is on his grandma. He says, what the hell? The kid says, yeah, it's not so funny when it's your mother, is it? I want to thank you for coming to my one-man show. I myself would not have. The idea of going to a one-person show is anathema to me. When you take in a play, there's different characters. Maybe you like this one, maybe you find that one interesting. Here, it's just me. If you've already decided you don't like me, you're screwed. Even with a play, it's not that safe. Nowadays, playwrights can only afford to write 3, 4, tops 5 characters. In the old days, when there was like 30 characters in a show, if it didn't grab you right off the bat, you didn't lose hope. You looked down at the program. You said, maybe the sheriff will be good. You may remember me. I formerly went on the screen under the name of Irene Dunn. I'll never forget. Well, I suppose I will eventually. When they decided to put my little show on, they're going to build me a snappy new set. I said, no, leave the one that's there from the old show. I like it. It reminds me of the incredibly depressing house I grew up in. That was my mother's favorite song, Beautiful Dreamer. The year was 1938, and I was 10. I was standing in the kitchen, as I recall, over by the entrance to the pantry. My mother was seated at the oilcloth-covered table, nursing a glass of sherry. She held in her hand one of the newfangled Lund can openers, which had recently appeared on the market. He asked me to marry him, you know. Who did? Mr. Lund. Eddie Lund was his name. We went to college together. Well, he was a year ahead of me, but I knew him, and he asked me out, and we dated for a while. He was crazy about me. So in love, he said. She had a habit of talking to me as if I were one of her girlfriends, someone she felt free to confide in. And he asked me to marry him, but I said no. I didn't love him. I mean, I just didn't love him, and without love, love makes the world go round. But I had no idea what he was going to accomplish. He made millions out of it. But if you had married Mr. Lund, you wouldn't have had me. Yes. I loved my mother to distraction. To me, she was the most beautiful woman in the world. And I wasn't far off in my assessment. Men stopped in their tracks when she went by. It meant nothing. Only one thing in this world mattered to my mother, her husband. If he ever left me, I'd kill myself. You want me to stay alive? It's your job. Keep him around, kiddo. She actually said this to me shortly before I turned 6. I looked in her eyes and saw that she was deadly serious. And with a silent aye, I accepted the mission. I would convince my rival for my mother's affections that I, his son, loved him more than anything in the world. That way, I reasoned, he would be disinclined to leave hearth and home, and my mother would not kill herself. Rarely had a 6-year-old boy been given such a job, or taken it on with such commitment. And for quite a long time, it worked. I first performed that trick when I was 5. I was not born with the name Orson Bean. My natal name was Dallas Burroughs. My mother named me Dallas after her father, whom she absolutely adored. He was a Vermonter and was, among other things, Calvin Coolidge's first cousin. He was named Dallas after President Polk's vice president. Who would name their kid after an obscure president's even more obscure vice president? My grandfather's parents did, and mine named me after him, so I suffered from the name Dallas throughout my childhood. Orson Bean came later, as we shall learn. We lived in the upper half of a 2-family house at number 12 Wright Street in North Cambridge, a suburb of Boston. The rent was $20 a month. My father fancied himself an intellectual. Politics ran rampant in the house. Fundraisers were held, where glasses of rye and ginger were sold for 50 cents to raise money for the cause. Endless discussions took place about the people. Anarchists debated with socialists. Trotskyites argued with Bolsheviks. Decades later, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the New York Times sent a reporter to Moscow to find out if any of the early original revolutionaries were still around. He cabled back that there were a few, and added the interesting factoid that followers of Trotsky offer as proof of his farsightedness the fact that none of his predictions have as yet come true. The consumption of rye and ginger at the fundraiser spilled over into everyday life, though in my mother's case, her preference was for wine. Arguments ensued. A fight more vociferous than usual erupted one night. My mother was convinced her husband was seeing a woman on the side. Her name, I gathered from overheard conversations, was Rosebud. On the night, as a sort of sour joke, she presented him with a half pint of 4 Roses whiskey. Furious, he smashed it in the kitchen sink, stormed into their bedroom. She followed and slammed the door. The din of the argument gradually abated, and was replaced by the muted sounds of lovemaking. I sat at the oilcloth-covered table for a while listening to noises I did not need to hear. Then I stood up and went to the sink to retrieve the shards of glass from the broken whiskey bottle. In the morning, my mother, unable to leave well enough alone, brought the subject up again. My father exploded. "Rosebud! For God's sake, can't you talk about anything but Rosebud?" "Well, I'm sure you don't mind talking about her when you're over there with her." "Well, if I do, it's not about what a lousy job she does keeping the house clean." "So you admit that's the way you are these nights when you're not home?" "Oh, for God's... Come on, Dallas, we're out of here. We're going for a walk." I hustled after him down the stairs. "I'll be dead when you get back," she was screaming from the second-story window as we headed up the block. "You'll find me on the floor in front of the gas oven." Maybe she means it this time. "Dad," I tried to appear casual, but my guts were heaving. "Nah, it's an act. Come on." We wandered the neighborhood for 20 minutes, headed back, climbed the stairs. A strong smell of gas filled the apartment coming from behind the closed door to the kitchen. "Dad," I was really frightened. Don't you think we ought to..." "Nah, we'll call her bluff. Come on." Into my parents' bedroom we stormed. He shut the door, opened the windows to clear the air. Minutes went by that seemed like hours to me. "Dad..." "I tell you, it's an act. You don't know women." And sure enough, after a while, the gas smell went away, the door opened, and she stood there, furious and humiliated. I made my escape into the living room. Later on, as I always did, I heard the sounds of pleasure coming from behind the door. I used to think about a lot of different things when I was a kid. Is there a God? Are we all just characters in his dreams? And when he wakes up, will we disappear? The idea of reincarnation appealed to me. I thought it made sense. I figured I must have done some really bad stuff in a past life. My parents sent me to different Sunday schools to expose me to the ideas. I knew it was really to get me out of the house so they could fool around. What I learned on those Sundays was Congregationalists throw the best Christmas parties. Episcopalians put on elegant Easter processions. I got to lead the donkey down the aisle of a fancy church in Harvard Square. And Unitarians are no fun at all. The earliest thought I can remember having as a boy was that someday I would break out of there and be happy. The phrase breakout came from the Warner Brothers prison pictures I was starting to go to and love. Jimmy Cagney breaking out of the big house. The movies saved my life in a way. Looking back on it, I really believe that. At home, there was no right or wrong. Everything was a jumbled up mess. At the pictures, crime never paid, good was always rewarded, and dreams came true. Spencer Tracy tried and would not give up, and finally invented the light bulb. Greer Garson discovered radium, and Paul Muni created pasteurization. I'd come out of a Saturday matinee blinking in the afternoon sun, saying to myself, it can be done. I can do it. I will. At the pictures, there was no weird sexual stuff going on. Even married couples slept in separate beds. Bing Crosby, a good priest, taught troubled boys in his parish to play basketball instead of stealing cars. Edward G. Robinson ended a life of crime, expiring on the steps of St. Agnes, crying, "Mother of God, is this the end of Rico?" The movies did for me what Sunday school had not. They gave me a conscience. My parents were invited to go to a political convention of some kind in Chicago. They would be gone for 5 days. They left food money for me on the oilcloth-covered table and said they would call from time to time to make sure I was all right. Never occurred to them that I wouldn't be. Truth be told, it didn't occur to me either. I didn't need a babysitter. I was 10. They packed their bags, bid me goodbye. I told them not to worry and watched from the window as they headed up the block on their way to North Station and the train to Chicago. Then I sprang into action. I had a plan. The year before, when I was 9, I had joined the Cub Scouts. In order to march in one of the parades they held from time to time, a boy had to wear, if not the entire uniform, at least the neckerchief and cap. I had never been able to afford them. Now I calculated what they would cost, took the food money for the week, went to Cub Scout headquarters and bought them. What I had left over was exactly enough for 10 cans of Franco-American spaghetti. My favorite. I figured I could do the 5 days perfectly well on 2 cans a day, and that's what I did. True to their word, the folks called from Chicago twice during the week to check on me. I told them I was fine, and they got off the phone as quickly as possible. Long distance cost. When they got back and discovered what I had done, they were furious, but the fate was accompli, and I marched with the Cub Scouts. Going to the movies cost a dime. I realized early on that if I was ever going to have any pocket money, I was going to have to earn it. There was no such thing as an allowance in those days. Neither I, nor Elliot Knight, nor Basil Bork, nor Parker Swan ever even heard of one. Allowance was what a fat guy got when you let out his pants. Money could be made. There were lawns to mow in the summer. There was snow to shovel in the winter. I washed windows for 5 cents a side. And when I had saved up enough for a used bike with a basket on the handlebars, I rode to East Cambridge and Gibbot's Bakery. Gibbot made a delicious confection called the cream fried cake, which they sold for a nickel. There was a day-old store at the bakery. I bought day-old Gibbot cream fried cakes, 2 for a nickel, and peddled them door to door for 5 cents apiece. On Memorial Day, people went to Mount Auburn Cemetery to lay flowers on their loved ones' graves. It was a long, hot climb up the hill to the cemetery entrance. I bought orange soda at the First National for 5 cents a quart. I bought stacks of paper cups and a big chunk of ice. I stuck the ice in a galvanized tub of water, chilled the soda, and lugged the whole thing up the hill in my radio flyer wagon. I sold cups of the cold soda for a nickel. I got 5 cups out of every bottle. That was 20 cents profit per quart. I did so well that the next year I hired a kid to lug an extra wagon. Take that home, put it in water. A boy without a dog is only half a boy. Somebody said that. I turned 12 and began jonesing for one. I broached the idea with my father, who refused even to consider it. I badgered him. I pleaded and wheedled and coaxed and cajoled and finally wore him down. All right, for God's sake, but a small one that won't eat much. There was a dog pound in Boston. From North Cambridge, I took the streetcar to Harvard Square, switched to the subway to go into the city. The pound was a short walk from the station. I took a deep breath, pushed open the door. I was afraid that at my age, they would not let me adopt a dog. I was wrong. They would have let me have every mutt in the place. I began checking out the cages. The number of would-be adoptees was heartbreaking. And the last cage on the left, I found him. A 2/3 grown part shepherd. I touched the front of the cage and he licked my fingers through the wire mesh. The love was instantaneous and mutual. He was too big, I knew that's what my father would say. He'll eat us out of house and home, but I had to have him. I signed the form, forked over the fee, $1.75, a goodly part of my savings. I hadn't thought about a collar or leash, but one of the attendants came up with a piece of clothesline. He opened the cage, the prisoner came out and licked my hand again. On the subway, people smiled at me and my dog. When we got to Harvard Square, I decided that rather than take the streetcar, Homer and I would walk the rest of the way. That's what I had decided to name him, Homer. My father had made me read the Odyssey. Oh. When cars honked, Homer shivered and shook. I could tell he was a skittish dog. Small wonder, God knows what he'd gone through to wind up in that cage. Well, never again. I told myself Homer was mine now, and I would always protect him. We reached the house, climbed the stairs. I could hear my father explaining something to my mother. For the umpteenth time, we walked into the kitchen, and he stopped in mid-sentence. You call that a small dog? No way is that thing staying in this house. Get it out of here. Now, George, a rare burst of motherliness. The drama went on for 10 minutes, culminating in an order for me to keep it out of the living room and don't let it bite anyone. I was happy. Maybe really happy for the first time in my life. At night in my bed, Homer and I gazed into each other's eyes. I was scared too, though. Now I had something to lose. Keeping Homer out of my parents' sight became my preoccupation. I came up with a collar and leash and a red bandana to go around his throat, what the well-dressed dog will wear. We went for long walks around the neighborhood. There came an afternoon when my mother was perched at the oilcloth-covered table, nursing her glass of sherry. Not knowing she was there, I walked into the kitchen with Homer. Oh, there you are. Come here, doggy. Mom, please, he's nervous around you. Leave him alone. Don't you tell your mother what to do. Come here, mutt. She grabbed his leash, pulled his muzzle to her face, and slobbered a boozy kiss on it. Poor thing tried to back off. Mom, really, he doesn't like it. You respect your mother. Damn you. Come here, dog. She pulled him close. He tried to back off. She wrestled him closer. He whined. He barked. And then, God help me, he nipped her cheek. Ow! Ow! That damn dog, he bit me! I told you, Mom, I told you he didn't like it. Get out! Get out! I was absolutely terrified. Homer and I hid in my bedroom. He climbed up onto my lap and we huddled together. My father finally got home from work. I heard whispered conversations, my mother in tears. For 3 days, nothing was said, and I began to convince myself it might blow over. Fourth day was Saturday. The old man was home from work. Homer and I were in my bedroom. Dallas, come in here. I got something for you. I walked into the kitchen. Here. Here's a nickel. Go on down to the drugstore. Drink a Pepsi there. I was instantly on red alert. My father had never given me a nickel. That's okay, Dad. I don't want a Pepsi. Do what I tell you. Take the nickel. I'll go get Homer. No! Leave him here. Go on. I was terrified, but I did not dare disobey. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. The 3 long blocks to the drugstore, swilled the drink, sped back. When I turned the corner to our block, I saw a truck with the words animal control on it. It was pulling away from in front of our house. There was a window on the back, and I saw my dog's face in it looking at me through the wire mesh. I ran too late, of course. I raced into the kitchen. Why? Why? Just a matter of time till he bit someone and we got sued. If you weren't so damn selfish, you would have known that. I went into my bedroom, locked the door, and cried. I cried and sobbed and sobbed. And then I promised myself they would never make me cry again. My shoes were made in Vietnam. I felt like sharing that with you. I used to think about Dallas Lund. If my mother had married the can opener tycoon, that's what she would have named her son. What kind of a life would Dallas Lund have had? Surely he would have been a happy little boy. His mother would hold him on her lap while she read to him. When his father got home from work, she'd have dinner ready. Maybe it would already be on the table. Perhaps Ed Lund would have a drink, a cocktail, while he explained to the family about the wonderful new inventions he had come up with that day. Mom would clap her hands in delight and tell him they sounded fantastic and that he truly was making the world a better place. Ed Lund would laugh. He'd pick up little Dallas, toss him in the air and catch him. Dallas would laugh too. Little Dallas Lund could have anything he wanted. His father was rich, after all. He wouldn't have to save up for a used bike or shovel snow and sell Jabat's cream fried cakes. His folks would give him a new bike when he asked for it, with streamers and the handlebars. When the war came, Dallas Lund would not wait to be drafted. He'd already be in college, and he would enlist in the Reserve Officers Training Corps. When he graduated, they'd give him his lieutenant bars, and everyone would tell him how handsome he looked in his uniform. He'd be sent overseas, and on his first day in combat, he'd be hit by an artillery shell and die. Things did not feel good at home. The atmosphere in the house was so toxic that I pushed my bed against the window and opened it wide every night, even in the dead of winter. And bundling up with extra covers to keep warm, I laid my pillow on the sill and drifted off to sleep with my head literally outside the house, drinking in the cold, clean, fresh night air. Shortly after I turned 16, my father apparently decided I was old enough to look after myself, so he slipped out the back, Jack, never to return. Pandemonium at 12 Wright Street. My mother in despair. I, on the other hand, quietly began preparing to become man of the house. I had an after-school job working evenings as busboy in the dining room of the Continental Hotel, an elegant establishment where movie stars stayed when they came to town. With WW2 raging and most of the young men off at war, plenty of jobs were available for industrious boys. They liked me at the hotel. Sometimes they let me wait on table. This meant tips in addition to salary. I had money. I would save my mother. With the old man gone, I felt reborn. I had boundless energy. In spite of my long days at school and work, I completed all my homework assignments, usually at a table in the hotel kitchen. I called my mother every night from the payphone in the stairwell to assure her I'd be home. I asked if she'd like anything to eat from the kitchen. I wrote down the number of the payphone on a slip of paper and handed it to her. Call me if you need anything. They'll get me a message. I believed with all my heart that if I were allowed to captain the ship, it would not sink. On the fourth night after my father skipped town, I arrived home from work carrying a paper bag with a croissant in it for her breakfast. She was not there to receive it. I turned in and went to sleep. I was awakened at 1 in the morning by the sound of raucous laughter. I opened my bedroom door crack, looked out, and saw her teetering up the stairs on the arm of a strange man. I went back to bed, pulled the pillow over my head, hoping to shut out the sounds from my parents' bedroom. For the next 3 nights, the scene was repeated with different players. I was devastated. On the fourth night, I arrived home from work and found her in the kitchen, seated at the oilcloth-covered table. She was wearing her nightgown. What's the matter? You couldn't find anyone? She burst into tears and ran into her bedroom. I sat down at the table. In a little while, she was back, standing in the doorway. I looked at her. In spite of everything that had happened to me, she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. Dallas, I'm so lonely. I can't stand to be alone. Dallas, won't you please come to bed with me, baby? My heart began to beat. Then I thought of Circe from the Odyssey, and a voice in me said, if you do this, you'll never escape. A cold, self-protective rage took me over. I turned from her, walked into my bedroom, and locked the door. Through the night, I heard the muffled sounds of my mother's sobs. In the morning, I packed my things in a canvas bag. I had seen a sign in the window of a house not far away advertising a room for rent. I approached it, carrying my bag, and spoke to the lady who answered the door. She looked at me dubiously. I was a kid. I flashed my wad. It's okay, I got a good job and plenty of money. She took me up 2 flights, showed me the room. It was white and sunny and clean. The rent was $6 a week. I paid the $6 and moved in. It's clean. I told myself it's white and clean. Thursday of that week was my mother's 45th birthday. I thought about calling her, decided not to. I'd made a clean break, but I'd leave it that way. She was probably with one of her bums anyway. Business was light at the hotel dining room that night. I sat down at the table in the kitchen, pulled out my school books. One of the assistant cooks yelled from the far end of the room, "Hey kid, there's a call for you in the stairwell." I knew who it was. Nobody else had the number. Yeah? This is your mother, Dallas. I know. Won't you please come over? It's my birthday. No, you're drunk. I walked back to my clean white room. In the morning, I got dressed and left for school. If I had asked myself what I felt, which I didn't, the answer probably would have been nothing. I put my books away in my desk. In a little while, a young woman walked into the classroom. She said something to the teacher, who looked at me. "Dallas, Mr. Downey would like to see you." When I arrived at the principal's office, he invited me in. "Well, Dallas, I don't know how else to put this. Your mother is dead." I looked at the old Seth Thomas clock on his wall, listened to it tick. How how did it happen? Well, apparently she turned on the gas, put her head in the oven. The neighbors smelled it after a while, called the police. Good thing, whole place could have blown up. Sorry. The inappropriateness of my remark seemed to hang there in the air and more or less signaled an end to the conversation. The principal suggested I might like to take the rest of the day off. In an act of incredible generosity, the hotel offered me a small room at no charge for as long as I continued to work for them. Back before the term had been coined, I became a liberated miner. A moth goes into a chiropractor's office. He says, "Doc, my life has hit rock bottom. My wife is having an affair. My kid has run off with a hooker and taken most of the money." The chiropractor interrupts the moth. He says, "Excuse me, but shouldn't you be seeing a psychiatrist or something? Why did you come in here?" He says, "The light was on." Guy's in a horrible automobile crash. His wife is in the hospital waiting to hear if he made it. The doctor comes out. He says, "Well, your husband pulled through, but I'm afraid he's going to be a basket case the rest of his life. You'll be changing his diapers, feeding him through a tube." She says, "Oh, no." She says, "Nah, I'm just fucking with you. He's dead." I graduated from high school, and to celebrate, Parker Swan and I took the subway to Revere Beach, the Coney Island of Boston, where we took in a sideshow and were entertained by Albert Alberta, the half-man, half-woman. Poor Albert Alberta. He took himself dancing one night and was never seen again. Feel free to pass that on to anyone you like. I turned 18 and joined the Army. The war had ended, but they needed occupation troops in Japan. You could get your selective service over with in those days in 18 months. It was a very good deal. Friends of mine who didn't take it stayed eligible for the draft and wound up spending long, miserable years in Korea. In Japan, I did my magic act to entertain the troops and get out of KP. When you enter the Army, you're a buck private. Upon completion of your basic training, you automatically become private first class. If you do anything useful at all, you're promoted to corporal or Tech 5. Conversely, if you screw up in any way, you're busted back to buck private. For a soldier to complete his term of enlistment as a private first class means he has not been noticed. That was my goal, and I achieved it. I mustered out and returned to Boston to pursue my career as a professional magician. I moved into a theatrical rooming house. There was a full year's work around New England in those days in nightclubs. I played the Copacabana in Fall River. I worked the Moose Club in Pawtucket. Pawtucket, home of the National Limerick Museum. Could I have the housewives, Julie? Ladies and gentlemen, an experiment in mind control. Young man, right here. Would you stand up, please? How about giving this young man a hand for coming up and volunteering? What's your name, my good man?
Jim.
Jim, I'm Orson. Jim, take this deck of cards, look through it, and ascertain for yourself, as far as you can see, it's a normal deck of cards, 52 different cards, nothing tricky about it, all right? Nothing, as far as you can see. Now, Jim, turn the deck upside down, fan it out like this, pick one card without looking at it at random, and place the card face down on the chair without looking at it. Very good. Now, square up the deck and hand it to me. Now, for the first time, pick up the card, look at it, don't show it to me, but do show it to the audience. I'll see it. I'll see what it is. All right. Now, Jim, tell me when to stop. Just say stop anytime.
And stop.
Place it on. Watch me very carefully. Make sure that I'm doing no hocus pocus, no prestidigitation, no legerdemain. That's French for legerdemain. Card is not on the top, it's not on the bottom, it's in the middle where you placed it. Now, take the deck and put it behind your back, Jim, where you can't see what you're doing. Step down towards the audience, and without looking, take the top card, put it on the bottom to get rid of it. Now, this is the important part. Take the next card, turn it upside down, and place the upside down card somewhere in the middle of the deck on top of the card you just selected. Mind control.
Place it upside down.
In the middle of the deck, on top of the card you selected. Well done. Now, square up the deck and bring it around. Now, I am not touching the deck, ladies and gentlemen. Now, hold it back off a little bit. Hold it down like this and fan through the deck until you come to the up. There's the upside down marker. What was the name of the card you selected?
7 of
Clubs.
7 of clubs. See if you've placed the upside down marker on top of the 7 of clubs.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. You did it. Mind control. All right. Now, one more trick. I want you to count 6 cards into my hand, face down, one at a time. 6 cards. I didn't tell you to shuffle, but it's all right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, take the other cards, fan them out like this, and hold them in your right hand, up in the air in your right hand. Ladies and gentlemen, the Statue of Liberty. Keep the cards as a souvenir. Souvenir of one of the great evenings of your life. This is a story about a magic trick in which a young boy goes into a magician's supply store, says to the guy behind the counter, I've heard of a trick, he says, where the magician counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards, throws away 1, 2, 3, and when he counts them again, he still has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The man behind the counter says, a trick where the magician counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards, throws away 1, 2, 3, and when he counts them again, he still has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He says, that's right. The man behind the counter thinks for a moment. He says, I've heard of a trick where the magician counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards, throws away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and when he counts those, he has 1, 2, 3. He says, but I've never heard of a trick where the magician counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and in my opinion, it can't be done. I decided to see if I could drop the magic and get by doing straight stand-up comedy, writing all my own material. I also made a decision at that time to change my name. I didn't like Dallas Burroughs. It reminded me of my life. I came up with the name Orson Bean. Pompous first name, Orson Welles. Silly second name, Bean. In my act, I dressed as a college kid. I had a crew cut, wore a 3-button suit, and my opening line was, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Orson Bean, Harvard 48, Yale nothing. You laugh. They did not do so at the Moose Club. as the musicians in the backup bands I was working with kept telling me my stuff was too hip for the room. I worked all there was in New England, moved to Philadelphia. There was a full year's work booked out of Philly, the Moose Club in Harrisburg. I now felt ready to take a crack at the big time. Maybe I could find audiences who appreciated my material. I rode the Greyhound to New York City, checked into a cheap hotel on 8th Avenue. It was 1951. There were still elevator operators in those days. I rode the Otis with one such, a young man with a bad haircut and a Band-Aid on the back of his neck. When we reached my floor in the hotel, he let out a big sigh, turned to me and said, "I don't know. You know?" That struck me as oddly profound. And I've never forgotten it. I don't know, you know? I'd heard of a supper club in New York called the Blue Angel. Famous cabaret stars worked that way. I rode the crosstown 50th Street bus to the fashionable East Side. The club was in a brownstone between Lexington Avenue and 3rd. I tried the doorknob, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. What if it hadn't been? What would I have done? Why was I there in the first place? I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a manager. It was 3 in the afternoon. I had no business walking into one of the most famous nightclubs in the country looking for work. But like the bumblebee who does not know he can't fly, I walked on anyway. I found myself in a room lit by a single light bulb. Chairs were up on tables. There was a bar on the left-hand side. A grand piano stood in the corner. On the far wall stood a pair of swinging doors, which I assumed led to an inner room where the entertainment took place. This was clearly a holding area for people waiting to see the show. A flight of stairs led to an upper floor. I climbed them. There were men's and ladies' restrooms. A light shone from an open door at the end of the hall. I approached it and stuck my head in. A middle-aged man sat at a desk going through a pile of receipts. He looked up. "What do you want?" "I'm a comic." "Say something funny." "Belly button." "I'm short an act. Come back tonight at 10. I'll put you on and have a look." The man was Max Gordon, the owner. I splurged and took a cab back to my hotel. I had seen a sign in the window of a tailor shop nearby that said that for 50 cents the proprietor would sponge and press a suit. I stepped into a little cubicle, handed him the suit, and while he did his work, I stood there in my underwear going over my routines, selecting the best ones. That night, I rode the bus back to the East Side. The Blue Angel was packed. Bobby Short was playing the piano. I sat down at the bar and ordered a Coke. In a little bit, Max Gordon appeared. "Oh, hello there. Why don't you stand in the back and get a feel for the room?" I followed him through the swinging doors and leaned against the wall. Eartha Kitt was singing. Whoa. The audience applauded after each number. When my turn came, the MC announced there'd be a special added attraction. There was a smattering of polite applause, and I stepped to the microphone. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Orson Bean, Harvard 48, Yale nothing." The audience laughed. They looked at my crew cut and my 3-button suit. I was 22 years old. I did not look like any comic they had ever seen. I told them about my grandfather, my great-great-great-grandfather, who fought in the American... He didn't actually fight in the revolution. He was a bartender. But the foremost bartender of the American Revolution. My great-great-great-great-grandfather poured the shot heard round the world. They laughed. I did a routine about ancient Rome, the fashionable East Side of ancient Rome, those of the narrow lapel toga. I told the strange tale of the vampire chicken of Putney, Vermont. When the moon is full, he pecks people to death. I closed with a routine about an Australian who falls in love with an ostrich. The audience went nuts. I'd never gotten such laughs in my life. My head was spinning. Immediately after the show, Max Gordon signed me to a 6-month contract. An associate of the powerful syndicated newspaper columnist Walter Winchell had been in the house. The publicist for the club told me to look in the paper the next day. I went back to my room at the hotel and tried to sleep. In the morning, Winchell's column appeared. It said, his name is Orson Bean. We never heard of him either. He went on unannounced at the Blue Angel last night and brought down the house. My career was off and running. With a contract for $125 a week in my pocket, I was in the chips. I found an apartment to rent. I got booked on the Ed Sullivan Show. The Sullivan Show was the hottest thing on TV. In this day and age when programs are thrilled with an audience of 13, 14 million people, the average viewership on a Sunday night for Ed Sullivan was 70 million people. There was only 3 networks. I became one of Ed's regulars. The singing nun appeared on the show to do her hit record, Dominica, Nica, Nica. Ed never learned to use cue cards well because Sister Dominique is a member of the Order of the Carmelite Nuns. She is unable to accept our usual recompense. So, in lieu of the traditional stipend, we are presenting Sister Dominica's convent with a Jew. I'm sorry, a Jeep. In the early 50s, Manhattan was jumping. The jazz joints went till 4 in the morning. Mayor LaGuardia had kicked burlesque out of town, but I took the tubes over to Union City and caught the great burlesque comic Billy Cheese and Crackers Hagen. The straight man, dressed as a cop, nabs Billy Hagen. You're under arrest, Hagen, and anything you say may be held against you. He says, Esther Williams. For those of you under 100, think Scarlett Johansson. 3 weeks, 3 days later, Esther Williams catches my act at the Blue Angel, and I get to sit with her and have a picture taken. Bob Hope, the great Bob Hope, invites me to his table and praises my act. What a thrill. Orson Welles instructs the manager to bring me to him. You stole my name. I started to be cast in Broadway plays and musicals. The first one closed out of town, never even got in. The next one made it to Broadway and lasted 4 performances. I finally found myself in a hit, a comedy called Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter. Jane Mansfield and Walter Matthau were in it with me. What a thrill to see our names on the marquee of a Broadway house. Jane was breathtakingly beautiful, a sweet, simple girl with incredible boobs. It was the first play she'd ever been in, and it was a smash on Broadway. She was the toast of the town and loving it. She darted about the stage like a little kid with incredible boobs. Orsie, she called me Orsie. Come in here, Orsie. I'd walk into her dressing room. Orsie, look through the crack in the curtain and see if anybody famous is out front. If there was a celebrity in the house, Jane always gave a better performance. If there wasn't one, I made a name up. One night, Marlon Brando came to see the show. I knew him slightly. I had met this star and that. There are no strangers in the aristocracy of success. How can I impart to you my experience in my Broadway? Julie, give me the house lights. Allie Mills, front and center. Get up here. Now, This is the part of the show where I get somebody out of the audience and do a little play. Now, Ali, you're the producer. You are the producer, and you have labored from the very beginning, doing all the drudgery that a producer has to do, getting the word out, filling the seats, arranging for critics to come, booking the space for rehearsal, for the lighting, and you have stood in the back maybe 100 times watching as I get someone out of the audience. And there you are in anonymity, in obscurity, in the back. Perhaps standing because you've given up your seat to a paying customer. And I know that you have watched the women that I got up here to do this thing with, and I know that you've said to yourself, I could do that. And God forgive me for saying so. I know that you've said sometimes, I could do it better than she did. Now, you've never said so, and you never will, and I love you for that. But I know you've felt it, so here is your chance. Now, as you know, the little play we do is called The Great Balloon Ascension, and in this, you play the part of a strapping young farmer who takes his old grandfather, bent over with age, to the fairgrounds to see the balloon go up. Now, you have the opening line, as you know. Let me hear you say it. Here we are at the fairgrounds, Grandpa, to see the balloon go up.
Here we are at the fairgrounds, Grandpa, to see the balloon go
Very
up.
nice. Now, I ask you, see? I ask you, as you know, 3 times if the balloon went up, and you say no, and the 4th time you say yes. All right, you got that?
I got it.
All right. Ali and I present the Great Balloon Ascension.
Don't judge me. Here we are at the fairgrounds, Grandpa, to see the balloon go up.
Let me give you a little help. A farmer's life is not an easy one. It's a hard scrabble existence. You're up in the morning, feeding the chickens, milking the cows, you plow the field, you sow the seed, you nurture the crops, you reap the harvest, and it isn't until early winter that perhaps you can relax and sit in front of a fire. Now, Ali, I want to see all of that. When you say the line, here we are at the fairgrounds, Grandpa, to see the balloon go up.
Here we are at the fairgrounds, Grandpa, to see the balloon go up.
Say, grandson, did the balloon go up yet?
Nope.
Grandson, did the balloon go up yet?
Nope.
Grandson, did the balloon go up yet?
Nope.
Hey, grandson, did the balloon go up yet?
Yes.
Let's go home. All right, now. All right. I don't want to make you nervous, Ali, but there's an agent in the house. Now, the agent has seen how well you play the farmer, but what an agent looks for is range. So we're going to try something else. We're going to do a play called The Prison Exercise Yard. Now, you stand over there, and I stand here, and we only speak as we cross paths. So walk like this. Here is when we would speak. We turn around and go back, and once again we would speak here. All right. Now, once more, you have the opening line. You say, how long you in for? And we cross again, and I say, 30 years. We cross again, and I ask you how long you in for. We cross again, and you say 20 years. And then I have the punchline. It's my show. Ladies and gentlemen, the Prison Exercise Yard.
How long you in for?
30 years. How long are you in for?
20 years.
Mail this for me. How about a hand? Holly Miller. We now kick the can 30 years up the road. I am leaving out a major chunk of my life. I am doing this, ladies and gentlemen, because I love you. And I don't want you to be stuck here till midnight. I'm grateful to you for coming, but I want at some point for you to go home. It's now 1981. I've been blessed with success on Broadway, in pictures, on TV, but at the game of love, I am batting zero. Everything I was taught as a boy was wrong, and I now have an ex-wife whom I love, and kids whom I love, living out in Manhattan, and I'm in despair in a small apartment in a high-rise building on the west side of Manhattan, down in the depths on the 34th floor. A letter comes in the mail. It's from a law firm. Schwartz. Dear Mr. Bean, this is to inform you that your divorce proceedings have been finalized. I am devastated at what I've done, the love I've pushed away. I open the window. It's blustery up here on the 34th floor. I shoot my plane into the breeze. It soars this way, that, then plummets straight down towards this street. At the last minute, it does not crash, but turns and flies up high. I give a little cheer. Yay! The wind is carrying it east towards Central Park, one short block away. Gliding along at what looks like a 12th, maybe 13th-story level, it comes to the end of the block, turns the corner, and disappears. I hang out the window for a while trying to snag another look, but it's gone. I am restless, stir-crazy, but I don't want to go out. I pace around for a while, flop down on the sofa, switch on the tube, watch something for 5 minutes, change channels, watch something else for 5. I can't remember a single thing I've just seen. I head into the John to take a whiz. I go to the kitchen, look in the icebox. Nothing tempts me. Kill a little more time. Another night spent waiting for nothing. I head back to the window again to check out the night. The sky is a pearly, luminescent pink. There's a high overhead cloud bank that traps the Manhattan neon and reflects it back down. So everything is lit up almost like day. I glance over towards the park. A tiny pinpoint of white is in the distance. A little speck peeking around the corner of the building over at Central Park West. Flying at what looks like to be maybe a 25, 30-story level. It flits this way and that, then heads up in my direction. My heart is starting to pound. The speck in the sky is beginning to be recognizable. It's a paper airplane. I crane my neck for a better look. I'm completely incredulous. I launched the plane a good 15 minutes ago. Will it come near enough that I'll know for sure it's mine? This is crazy. This is nuts. There are at least a dozen buildings between me and the park. There are 180 windows on the front of my high-rise. I counted them the next day, and it's headed to the one I'm in. It arrives. I snag it. Dear Mr. Bean.
Wow.
Oh my God, this is weird. This is real magic. It's It's a miracle. But what an odd, strange, peculiar little miracle. To shoot a paper airplane out of a 34th-story window, and a quarter of an hour later it comes back to the same window? What does it mean? I don't know. You know? I guess what it's telling me is that miracles do happen and are happening, and I better pay attention. I make a decision. I'm going to leave New York and move to LA to be near the kids. The president of the London Metaphysical Society addresses a room full of 100 people. He says, "Has anyone here ever seen a ghost?" And a number of hands go up. He says, "Has anyone here ever touched a ghost?" And a few hands go up. He says, "Has anyone here ever made love with a ghost?" And way in the back of the room, a little guy with a turban raises his hand. The president says, "Good heavens, my good fellow, you've actually made love with a ghost?" He says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said a goat." I find a cottage on the Venice canals. The kids start spending weekends, sleeping bags on the floor, marshmallows in the fireplace. A stray cat moves in and they love it. It's great. But I'm still feeling the way I was in New York. I'm frightened. A flyer drops in my mailbox. A guy named Tolly Birkin is offering the experience of firewalking to overcome fear. Belief in coincidence is a form of superstition. The event is to take place in 2 weeks at a campground near where the ex-wife lives. I send in the $50 deposit to secure a spot, and on the night, I park my car next to the others at the bottom of a hill. We're told to walk up to the top of a hill to a sort of a shack that's up there. They seat us in a semicircle of wooden chairs, the kind that have a half desk on the right-hand side. There are fees to be tallied up, forms to fill out. One of them says, "We won't sue if our feet burn." Charming. Tolly Birkin is there to welcome us. He's a protege of Tony Robbins. We march down the other side of the hill. There's a big pile of railroad ties, and they stack them up into kind of a pyramid, drench them with kerosene or something, and touch a match to them. And when the bonfire is flaring into the sky, we walk back up and sit in our wooden chairs. It's going to take about 2 hours for the thing to cook down, and the time will be filled by Tolly Birkin's pitch about how walking on fire has gone on for a long time in India, and no one really understands it. He says one interesting thing: if the time comes to take the walk and we're feeling frightened, we should not walk because we will burn. It's very reassuring because I'm scared shitless. Scared I'm going to walk on fire, and conversely scared I might chicken out and not walk, which would be humiliating. Tolly Birkin is rambling on something about mind over matter. I flash on one of Billy Hagan's punchlines. "It's a question of mind over matter. I don't mind and you don't matter." I don't know why I'm still feeling so frightened. I guess it's because my marriage came apart, but I'm determined to do something about it, and the time comes. It's 9:45, we walk back down. The bonfire is cooked down pretty good by that time. One of Birkin's minions begins barking commands. "Please take off your shoes and socks. Kindly do this whether you intend to take the walk or not." 2 more of his people appear, and with pitchforks they rake the dying bonfire into a swath about 4 feet wide and 9 feet long. We're standing a dozen feet away, and the heat is so intense I can hardly stand it. Tolly Birkin speaks up. "There is no shame in deciding not to take the walk." Sure. There are 3 rules to remember. 1, pay attention. My assistants will walk first and you will see they are not burning. 2, expect the best. Decide you're going to accomplish what you came to achieve. And rule number 3, go for it. Step onto the firebed and walk. Do not walk too fast or you may stumble and fall. And whatever you do, don't stop. If you do, you will burn. Tolly disappears. There's a moment of silence, and then a man, one of his assistants, steps barefoot onto the red-hot firebed. I'm holding my breath. I can't take my eyes off him. His toes are sinking into the coals, and flames are shooting up around him. 3 steps, 4, 5, and he's off, stomping up and down on a patch of damp grass. Now another man walks onto the fire, and then a woman. She's wearing a dress and holds her skirt up around her. Now people are walking in a steady flow across the 9-foot length of fire. I see it. I don't believe it. I can't do this. It's my ego screaming inside me. Okay, pal, I say to it, you stay here, I'm leaving. Suddenly, I'm not afraid. I step barefoot onto the firebed. The heat is incredible. I feel the burning coals under my feet. I look down, little tongues of flame are licking between my toes. With every step I take, dozens of tiny broiling embers are dancing across my feet. I'm walking not too fast, and I'm off. I'm thrilled. I'm elated. My feet have not burned. I can't wipe the triumphant grin off my face. Fellow walkers are pumping my hand and congratulating me. There's euphoria. We're clapping one another on the back. Of the 40 of us who started out, I'd say about 30 wound up taking the walk, maybe a couple of more. I spot one of the guys who has not walked. He seems to be trying to keep up a good front. I hear him say, I only came to observe. Driving back to my canal cottage, I try to digest everything that's happened to me. I've walked on fire without burning. The thing with the paper airplane happened. I guess what it boils down to is that there's a lot more to life than what I can see. The next day, I drive over to Ralph's Market to lay in some staples, Frosted Flakes and beer, just the essentials. While I'm there, I decide to pick up some radishes. It's always good to eat a vegetable. The man in charge of the produce department, his name is John, he wears a name tag, is the happiest person I've ever come across. A better way to describe John, he's comfortable in his skin. I always feel easy when I'm around him. Something tells me that day to ask him what his secret is. Maybe because I've walked on fire, I'm not afraid to ask, afraid of what the answer might be. So I pick up my radishes and I say, what's the story with you, John? He looks like he had expected the question. He puts down the mango he'd been polishing and he says, every night when I'm ready for bed, I get down on my knees and thank God. I do it again in the morning. Do you think I ought to do that? I don't know why I asked. It just seemed like I was supposed to. Of course. But I don't believe in God. Well, that doesn't matter. Just do it. Why do I have to get down on my knees? He likes it. That was all he said, and he went back to polishing his mango. So I thanked him and drove home and thought about it. I guess I decided that all else having failed, I would follow the instructions. On the table next to my bed is a little picture of Jesus. I don't know why I had it there. I didn't believe in him or anything. I had picked it up at the gift shop of the Self-Realization Center. They have pictures of everybody there. Jesus, Moses, the Buddha, all the Hindu guys. It's a one-size-fits-all spiritual center. When I bought the picture, the man in charge of the gift shop gave me a friendly little tip. One of the monks who lives at the center had been incarnated in the Holy Land back in the days when Jesus was around and knew him. And he assured the guy the picture was a very good likeness. So that night when I'm ready for bed, I get down on my knees, feeling pretty foolish. And I put my hands together and I say out loud, if there's anybody there, thank you for my day. Can't think of anything else to say, so I crawl into bed, switch off the light, and go to sleep. I do it again in the morning. I get down on my knees at the end of the bed and say once more out loud, if there's anybody there, thank you for my night's sleep. Then I take a shower, eat a bowl of Frosted Flakes, and go about my business. I keep this up religiously, no pun intended, for weeks, and without my even being aware of it, it stops feeling so foolish. And a bit at a time, I get the feeling that my little thank yous are being heard. By who or what, I have no idea, but it's a good feeling. Next, over time, I get the strong sensation that whoever is listening really cares about me, wants to look after me, perhaps even loves me. Okay, I say, if that's the way you want it, I'll use the G word. Thank you, God. And that's how I became a believer. No dogma or ritual, just a simple repeated little prayer which I came to mean. I didn't need church or a preacher. The way I looked at it was, I decided to leave out the middleman and deal direct with the maker. To me, religion is like the bottled water industry. God and water are free. What we pay for is the packaging. A dozen years go by. I have a lot of unlearning to do. There's no romance in my life, but that's okay. Then, my friend the Almighty decides to dick with me. I'm invited to take part in a play reading at a theater in Hollywood. Dan Lauria, who plays the husband in The Wonder Years, is producing it, and the actress who plays his wife, Allie Mills, is going to come and see it. I'd caught her on the show, of course, doling out the broccoli to Kevin, and always thought she was a fox. That night, script in hand, I walk onto the stage, glance out into the house, and there in the front row sits the fox. Her mother is with her, visiting from back east, and after the show, Mum invites the actors to go across the street to a restaurant for a little night lunch. I managed to position myself between mother and daughter. I'm sure the old lady thought I was hitting on her. And in the course of the evening, I asked Ms. Mills if she'll pay me the honor of dining with me one night. She says she will, and on that night I take her to a suitably impressive restaurant. And after dinner we sit and talk, and talk, and talk, and I find everything she says so damned interesting. In my bachelor days, on the rare occasion when there was a woman you just have to meet, as I'm opening the door of the restaurant, I'm saying to myself, I hope this dame doesn't order dessert. I keep asking Allie out, and when she sees I'm serious, she begins to get nervous. I am 22 years her senior. You're too old, she says to me one night. You're going to make me fall in love with you, and then you're going to die. What are you worried about? The new guy will take you to the funeral. I had misgivings of my own. Allie was 41 and had never been married. Believe me, I went into that cage with a whip and a chair. We go to the movies. I take her to see Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. Afterwards she says, I liked it, but what was it really about? I say, she's 18, he's 600, and it works. I'm crazy about her. I can't help it. I buy a ring. I go to the May Company and buy a ring. And that night in the restaurant, I put the little box that says May Company on the table, and she opens it and takes the ring out. It's beautiful, Ors. It's yours, Al. You can keep it or give it back or throw it away. I don't know. She says, I'm scared. I got to think. She thought for a long time. Christmas was coming. She wanted to exchange gifts on Christmas Eve. Mine was in a box from Brooks Brothers, a beautiful cashmere sweater. I took it out, and a little card fell on the floor. It had one word written on it, yes. Oh. I got all excited. I wanted to get married right away. She said, I'm a girl. I want to have a real wedding. I waited a long time. I gotta have invitations printed up and a dress made. I want to be a June bride. We settled on April. That was 23 years ago. It hasn't been easy, but it has been the best 23 years of my life. One thing had eluded me. I had always felt guilty about that phone call in the stairwell of the Hotel Continental when I was 16. It had bothered my dreams all these years. My father had died long since, but my mother lived on in me and always cast a slight patina of sadness over the happiest of times. One morning I wake up, look around the room, and realize that something has changed. The sun is still peeking through the space between the curtains and the French doors. The little picture of Jesus is still by the bed. The cat is sitting on the rug glaring at me with her usual baleful expression that says she can't believe I have not yet gotten up to feed her. But something is different. All at once, it becomes clear to me. The guilt I have lived with all my life over my mother's suicide is gone. It's gone. Oh, thank you, God. And God, while I have your ear, thanks for all of it. I love my life. Well, that's about it, folks. I do want to say there's one thing I feel the need to say, which is that at my age, I find myself thinking from time to time about the end of things. And when my time does come, it's my fervent wish that I go the way my dear old grandfather did, quietly in his sleep, not screaming like the passengers in his car. I'm going to close you with a little song. This is a little vaudeville song which was sung in the vaudeville houses of our country 100 years ago. It's a great favorite of yours, and I hope it is a favorite of mine. A vaudeville song. Two Irishmen and a Hebrew once went out for recreation, and they took enough provisions along to spend a week's vacation. But they got lost out in the woods, the nights grew dark and lonely, and at last all of their food ran out, except a piece of bologna. Now one of them said as he picked up a knife, there's no use in us carving, for if we do, there won't be enough to keep us all from starving. So I suggest we go to bed, and tomorrow, said Maloney, whoever has the nicest dream wins the piece of bologna. The following morning when they awoke 7:15, one of them said, I had a dream, I died and went to heaven. St. Peter met me at the gate, riding on a pony. Now I don't think you can beat that dream, I win the bologna. The other one said, I had a dream too, and mine was a world beater. I also died and went to heaven, welcomed by St. Peter. He rushed to me, held out his hand, he said, hello, Mahoney. Now I don't think you can beat that dream, I win the bologna. The Hebrew said, I'm dreaming too. It's a dream that couldn't be sweeter. I seen you both go up to heaven, welcomed by St. Peter. I waited and waited and waited around, and now I got so lonely, I didn't think you was coming back. So I got up and I ate the bologna. That's it. Good night, folks.